Most people mistake your silence for weakness. Niccolò Machiavelli understood it is often your greatest weapon. In a noisy world, reactions are expected. Explanations are demanded. The moment someone provokes you, society quietly pressures you to defend yourself, justify your intentions, or prove your innocence. Yet centuries ago, in The Prince, Machiavelli observed something unsettling about power. The more a person explains, the more power they surrender. Those who react quickly reveal their emotions. Those who defend themselves reveal their fears. But those who remain silent create uncertainty, and uncertainty shifts control. This is not a lesson in arrogance or coldness. It is a study of restraint, because sometimes the most dangerous response is no response at all. Most people are uncomfortable with silence, a pause in conversation, a message left unanswered, an accusation that receives no defense. In ordinary life, these moments create tension. The mind quickly fills the silence with interpretation. Why didn't he respond? Did the words strike deeper than expected? For many, silence is interpreted as weakness. Yet Machiavelli observed something very different about human perception. In The Prince, rulers are warned that appearances shape power as much as actions do. The moment someone reacts emotionally, they reveal where they can be touched. Silence interrupts this process. When a person refuses to react, observers lose their reference point. The provocation hangs unanswered. The accusation echoes without confirmation. Suddenly, attention shifts, not to the silent person, but to the one who spoke first. Psychologically, silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty unsettles those who rely on reaction to confirm their influence. Consider a familiar situation. Someone criticizes you publicly. The expected script is immediate defense, explanation, justification, emotional correction. Yet when no response arrives, the dynamic changes. The critic becomes visible. Their motives become clearer. The audience begins to watch them instead. Machiavelli understood that restraint can redirect perception. This is not manipulation, it is discipline. Silence allows time. Time allows observation. And observation reveals the structure of the situation before action is taken. The instinct to react quickly often comes from pride or fear. Pride demands reputation be defended immediately. Fear demands misunderstanding be corrected instantly. But power rarely operates on impulse. Those who pause create space between stimulus and response. Within that space, strategy forms. And slowly, a different realization emerges. Silence was never a weakness. It was control over timing. When someone criticizes, insults, or challenges another person, the visible action is the accusation itself. But beneath it lies something quieter, a search for reaction, a confirmation that the words landed, that the influence exists. Machiavelli understood this pattern long before psychology gave it precise language. In The Prince, he describes how those seeking power often provoke emotional movement in others. Because movement reveals position, anger reveals pride, defensiveness reveals insecurity, over-explanation reveals fear of judgment. Once these emotions become visible, they can be used. In everyday life, this happens constantly. A coworker questions your competence in a meeting. A stranger challenges your opinion publicly. A relative criticizes your choices in front of others. The content of the criticism often matters less than the reaction it produces. When someone reacts immediately, they give the other person exactly what was sought, proof that the pressure worked. The conversation shifts from the original accusation to the emotional display itself. Psychologists describe this as emotional leverage. A predictable response allows others to steer interaction. If someone knows that criticism produces anger, they can repeat the tactic whenever they wish to destabilize. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly. For him, Control often belonged to the person who revealed the least about their internal state. Not because they lacked emotion, but because they understood the cost of displaying it prematurely. When silence replaces reaction, the dynamic changes. The provocateur loses their compass. Without feedback, they cannot measure the effect of their words. Their strategy weakens because the expected script has been interrupted. In that moment, something subtle occurs. Attention moves away from your emotions and toward their behavior. And once that shift happens, power quietly begins to rebalance. There is a certain kind of person who unsettles others without saying much. They listen more than they speak. Some mistake this for indifference. Others see it as arrogance. But beneath it lies something far more strategic: unreadability. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that visibility creates vulnerability. In The Prince, rulers are advised to carefully manage what others can interpret about their intentions, because the more people know about your emotional reactions, the easier it becomes to anticipate and influence them. Psychologically, humans constantly scan for signals: tone of voice, facial expression, body language. These signals help others determine how to approach, persuade, or pressure you. When those signals are predictable, control becomes easier. For example, if someone knows that criticism angers you, they can provoke it whenever they want to disrupt your composure. If praise motivates you strongly, they can offer it strategically to guide your decisions. Emotional visibility becomes a map others can follow. Unreadability removes that map. This does not mean hiding emotions completely. It means choosing when they are shown. It means allowing others to see only what serves the moment rather than everything that is felt. Machiavelli viewed this as discipline, not deception. Those who reveal everything too quickly surrender their position in conversation, but those who remain measured create a psychological distance that others cannot easily cross. In that distance, curiosity grows. People begin to wonder what you think rather than assuming they already know. And when uncertainty surrounds a person's reactions, influence becomes difficult, because control depends on prediction, and the unreadable cannot be easily predicted. When someone questions your character, criticizes your choices, or misrepresents your intentions, the mind reacts instantly. A rush of explanations appears. Words gather quickly, ready to defend, correct, or prove innocence. This impulse is not weakness. It is human psychology. Machiavelli observed something that contradicts this instinct. In The Prince, rulers are warned against acting from wounded pride. A prince who reacts emotionally to every accusation becomes predictable. His opponents learn exactly how to move him. The struggle, therefore, is internal. Pride says, correct them immediately. Fear says, if you stay silent, people will believe the accusation. Insecurity says, your reputation will suffer if you do not explain. These voices are powerful because they appeal to identity. But discipline introduces a pause between feeling and action. Psychologically, that pause can feel like pressure building inside the body. The urge to respond becomes stronger the longer it is resisted. Yet within that tension lies a quiet advantage: time. Time allows emotions to settle. It allows observation of motives behind the accusation. It allows patterns to emerge that were invisible in the first moment of reaction. Machiavelli believed that rulers who governed their impulses first could govern circumstances later. Restraint is rarely comfortable in the beginning. It challenges the instinct to defend one's image immediately. But slowly, something changes. The need to explain weakens. The urgency to respond fades, and the silence that once felt like vulnerability begins to feel like control. Because the strongest reactions are not always spoken. Sometimes they are withheld. At first, silence feels like tension. Words sit behind the teeth. Thoughts gather, waiting to be released. The accusation, the criticism, the misunderstanding, All of it presses inward, asking to be answered. But something unexpected happens when the reaction never arrives. The person who provoked you begins to feel the weight of their own words. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this shift well. In The Prince, he explains that power often belongs to the one who controls timing. Those who move first reveal intention. Those who wait observe it. When someone provokes you, they expect movement, a defense, a rebuttal, an emotional reaction that confirms their influence. Without that reaction, their strategy loses direction. Psychologically, this creates discomfort for the provocateur. Humans rely on feedback to measure the impact of their actions. When no feedback appears, uncertainty grows. They begin to question whether their words mattered at all. Did the insult land? Was the accusation even noticed? Did they misjudge the situation entirely? In that uncertainty, attention shifts. The focus moves away from your response and toward their behavior. Observers begin to see the provocation itself rather than the reaction that usually follows it. Motives become visible. The tone becomes revealing. Machiavelli understood that restraint can expose others without confrontation. When you react emotionally, the story becomes about your reaction. When you remain silent, the story often becomes about their behavior. This is the moment control begins to change hands. Not because silence defeats the other person, but because it removes the leverage they expected. And without leverage, the conversation no longer moves according to their design. It pauses, and in that pause, power quietly shifts. Silence often leads to something most people fear: solitude. When a person stops reacting to every provocation, stops explaining every decision, and stops seeking constant validation, social dynamics begin to change. Conversations become fewer. Opinions become quieter. Some people drift away. At first, this can feel isolating. Human beings are deeply conditioned to maintain connection through agreement, explanation, and reassurance. When those signals disappear, others may interpret the shift as distance or disapproval. But Machiavelli saw solitude differently. In The Prince, rulers are advised to think independently, often away from the noise of public opinion. A leader who constantly reacts to the voices around him loses clarity. But one who creates distance gains perspective. Solitude provides that distance. Without constant reaction, the mind becomes quieter. Emotional pressures soften. Decisions are no longer shaped by the immediate need to defend reputation or maintain approval. Psychologically, solitude restores internal balance. It allows a person to observe social patterns rather than being pulled into them. It allows reflection before response. And most importantly, it weakens the emotional dependency that makes manipulation possible. Machiavelli understood that those who depend heavily on approval are easily guided by it. But those who become comfortable with solitude remove that pressure. Their choices begin to come from clarity rather than reaction. This does not mean rejecting relationships or becoming cold toward others. It means no longer requiring constant validation to feel secure. Solitude becomes a space where judgment strengthens. And once that internal stability forms, something subtle happens in social interactions. Words become fewer, but they carry more weight. Reactions become rarer, but they are more deliberate, because influence often grows in the absence of noise. And solitude, when chosen consciously, becomes not isolation, but strategic strength. Niccolò Machiavelli believed that the greatest form of control begins with self-mastery. In The Prince, rulers are warned that those who cannot govern their impulses cannot govern anything else. Anger, pride, insecurity. These emotions expose the ruler to manipulation. But when discipline stabilizes the mind, influence shifts. Psychologically, people respond differently to those who are emotionally steady. Calm behavior disrupts expectation. A person who rarely reacts becomes difficult to provoke, difficult to intimidate, and difficult to read. Others begin adjusting their behavior instead, not out of fear, but uncertainty. The disciplined individual does not dominate conversations, yet their presence carries quiet authority. They do not rush to defend themselves, yet accusations often lose their force around them. They do not chase approval, yet respect slowly gathers. This transformation is subtle. There is no dramatic moment where power suddenly appears. Instead, it accumulates gradually through restraint, observation, and deliberate action. Machiavelli understood that true authority rarely announces itself loudly. It grows through consistency, through patience, through the steady refusal to surrender control over one's own reactions. And eventually, the lesson becomes clear. Power does not always belong to the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it belongs to the person who speaks the least, because they have already mastered the one thing most people cannot control: themselves.